The scent of pine and roasted ham filled every corner of the house, but the warmth of Christmas dinner shattered the moment my mother opened her mouth. "You're a liability, Cassidy. This isn't your home anymore." The words landed like a grenade at the center of the table. Silverware paused. Wine glasses stopped mid-lift. My younger cousins went completely still. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel grief. I felt nothing at all, just a deep hollow quiet where my chest used to be. 11 years in service. A medical discharge. A bullet wound still tender beneath my left ribs. And this was the welcome I came home to. "My name is Cassidy Hale. Captain Cassidy Hale." That title once meant something. Now it just reminded me of everything I could no longer do. I rose slowly, my knee aching from the injury that ended my career, and reached for the duffel bag I'd left by the door. The same bag I'd carried through dust storms and mortar fire. Now it held little more than a change of clothes and the weight of a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. Not one person moved to stop me. Not my stepfather, Martin, who had always followed my mother's every word. Not my cousin Jamie, who once called me his hero. Not my sister Lily, who sat beside my mother in a silk blouse and said nothing, lips pressed tight as if this were simply embarrassing timing. I looked around the table one last time. I was asking for something, not rescue, just acknowledgement. I got silence. I turned and walked out into the snow. There was only one place left to go. My grandmother Frances's farmhouse, 3 hours north by bus. The last time I'd seen her was the summer before my first deployment. She'd stood in the doorway waving with one hand and wiping tears with the other, telling me to write often, come back always, and never forget who I was. I had failed on every count. At midnight, the bus dropped me at the edge of a 2-lane road marked by a weathered wooden sign barely visible in the drifts. I walked the last half-mile in the dark. My boots crunched against frozen gravel. Old memories stirred with every step. Summer fireflies, warm bread on the windowsill, Frances braiding my hair on the porch. The farmhouse emerged from the dark like something out of a dream. Golden light in the kitchen window. Smoke rising from the chimney. I stood at the gate, afraid to move. Afraid she might not recognize me. Afraid she might not want to. The front door opened before I could knock. Frances stood in the frame. Silver hair loose around her shoulders, thick cardigan, bare feet on the wooden floor. She looked straight at me, and she said 5 words that broke me open. "So they finally wore you down." My legs gave out. Not from exhaustion, from the unbearable feeling of being truly seen. She crossed the porch, pulled me into her arms, and held me without asking a single question. After a long moment, she pulled back, looked into my eyes, and said quietly, "You're not broken, Cassidy. You're beginning again." She brought me inside, wrapped me in a quilt, and handed me something warm. "Sleep," she said. "Tomorrow is soon enough for everything else." The next morning, she led me upstairs. At the end of the hall, she opened the door to my old childhood room. Dust on the shelves. Boxes along the walls. But the soft yellow wallpaper was still there. Little painted sparrows I had chosen when I was 8. On the nightstand, a small drawer sat slightly open. Something peeked through the gap. I pulled out a faded sketchbook. Mine. I had assumed it was lost years ago. Old pencil drawings filled the pages, soldiers, mountain ranges, a girl with distant eyes who I now recognized as myself. And tucked in the very back, a yellowed envelope sealed with wax. My mother's handwriting on the front. For Cassidy. To be opened when everything falls apart. I didn't open it. Not yet. The wound from her voice was still too fresh. I slipped it into my bag and turned to Frances in the doorway. "You kept all of this?" she said simply. "This house remembers you, even when others chose to forget." 2 days later, we were cleaning the old barn when I knocked a bundle of photographs from a high shelf. I knelt and flipped through them. One stopped my breath entirely. A young woman holding an infant wrapped in white. The woman wasn't my mother. Her features were softer. Her eyes were deeper. But those eyes, I recognized them. They were my eyes. I turned the photo over. Written in faded pencil. Vivian and Cassidy, 4 months. Frances had gone very still beside me. "Who is Vivian?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Your real mother." Time stopped. Frances sat down slowly on an overturned crate and told me everything. Vivian was her daughter, my mother's younger sister. Kind, creative, full of warmth. When Vivian became pregnant, my mother was furious. Said it was reckless. Said it would ruin everything. Vivian planned to raise me alone. She loved me, Frances said, before I was even born. When I was 2 years old, Vivian died in a fire at her apartment. The official report said faulty wiring. But Frances had never believed it. Vivian was meticulous. Careful. She didn't leave stoves unattended or windows near candles. The fire was too convenient. Too clean. My mother stepped in. Told everyone she was making a sacrifice, raising her sister's child. People praised her for it. She was celebrated. But Frances said what she had never been able to say aloud. She didn't think it was a sacrifice. She thought it was control. An erasure. My hands shook. 12 years of service. Money sent home every month. Medals in a drawer. All of it. For a woman who wasn't my mother by blood and had treated me like an inconvenience from the beginning. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Frances looked away. She threatened to cut me off completely. "I thought I could protect you by staying close. I know now that was a mistake." In the attic behind a quilted curtain, Frances showed me a trunk. Inside, journals, newspaper clippings, a fire report with a hand-sketched floor plan, and a medical file labeled Vivian Hale. Beside a marking near the fuse box, someone had scrawled 3 words in pencil. Not an accident. Near the bottom of the trunk, I found a leather journal with the initials VH on the cover. Vivian's journal. Her handwriting was strong and looping. The early entries were full of joy, my first words, my laughter, my small hands learning to clap. Then the tone shifted. An entry near the end read, "She came by again unannounced. She keeps asking about taking Cassidy for weekends." I said no. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I don't trust her. Something is wrong." And the final entry, the one that turned my blood cold, "Someone was outside last night. I didn't turn on the lights. If anything happens to me, tell her I loved her. Tell her about her mother. Tell her." The rest was scratched out. Ink smeared across the page like a storm. The journal ended there. No goodbye. No final entry. As if the pen had been taken from her hand. At the bottom of Vivian's box, tucked inside a velvet pouch, was a small flash drive. We plugged it into Frances's old desktop upstairs. Inside 3 audio files. The first was my mother's voice, cold and deliberate, telling someone to stay quiet, saying if anyone started digging it would come back on them. The second, she had a choice. She chose wrong. I just cleaned up what she started. The third was a phone call. My mother and a man whose voice I recognized immediately. Her husband, Senator Martin Carr. His words came through the speakers clear and terrible. "If she finds out, handle it like you handled Vivian." I pushed back from the desk and stood in the quiet of that room for a long time. This wasn't just a bitter family. This was evidence. We called Vanessa Cruz, an investigative journalist. She arrived the next morning with a satchel full of equipment, reviewed everything we had, and looked up slowly when we finished. "This is real," she said. "If it holds up, it takes everything down." She warned us there would be retaliation. I looked at Vivian's photo now hanging on the farmhouse wall and said, "Let it come. I've survived worse." When Joanna's annual charity gala came 3 days later, her signature event, televised, photographed, attended by every name in the city, we went. Frances wore her burgundy dress and pearls. I wore a navy suit and a silver pin she pressed into my hand for strength. My mother froze when she saw us enter the ballroom. She pulled us into a side hallway. The moment we were alone, her smile dropped. "What do you think you're doing?" she said very quietly. "I'm not your daughter," I replied. "Not by blood. And I can prove everything." I watched the color drain from her face as I held up the folder. She looked at Frances. She looked at the folder. And then Vanessa appeared in the doorway with her phone raised. "The story goes live in the morning," Vanessa said calmly. "You have one opportunity to get ahead of it." My mother stood in the corridor of her own gala, the portraits of donors watching from the walls, and for the first time she had no audience to perform for. Her shoulders dropped. Her voice went thin. "I'll make a statement. Tomorrow. Then enjoy your last gala," Vanessa said. The story published at dawn. By noon it had spread everywhere. Martin resigned. My mother denied, then went silent, then accepted a plea deal arranged through her lawyer. Former neighbors came forward. The retired firefighter who had responded to Vivian's building testified about what he'd found strange that night. Francis and I turned the barn into a retreat. For veterans, for survivors, for anyone who had been broken and needed somewhere quiet to rebuild. We called it the root line. I started painting again. The sketchbook I'd found in my old room filled slowly with color, with faces, with everything I had been too afraid to see. In the spring, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a letter in Vivian's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before the fire. It began, "My dearest Cassidy, if this ever reaches you, something went wrong. I hope I'm the one who gets to read this to you someday." She wrote 3 things. That she loved me before I was born. That I was not the product of her mistakes, but the proof she had tried to do something right. And that the world was hard on women who refused to go quietly, but to keep going anyway. She had sealed the letter with a pressed daisy. Brittle. Pale with age. But whole. I sat beneath the maple tree we had planted in her memory, read her words until I knew them by heart, and then I did what she never got to do. I stayed. I built something. I let the light in. Frances passed 2 months later peacefully with her hand in mine. She left me the farm and a note that read, "Now it's your turn to make the world a little gentler." I still read it every morning. And I keep my promise every day.